Today on CityCast Chicago, Mike Madigan takes the stand. Mayor Johnson and Governor Pritzker continue their icy relationship, and we're talking Southside development projects we're watching in 2025. Joining me to break it all down from Axios Chicago, Justin Kaufman, and Chicago Tribune's Jake Sheridan. It's Friday, January 10th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. Morning, my friends. Justin, welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah. New year. 2025 is our year, man. This is our year.
New year, same me. New year, same me. A couple of new improvements, new hobbies, new things I'm trying to do. But overall, same Jacoby Cochran. Jake, welcome back to the podcast.
It's good to be back. Thanks for having me.
I do think it's important, though, for some people to talk about their New Year's resolutions. Justin, do you participate in New Year's resolutions? Do you set explicit New Year's resolutions, or do you just call them small, long-term goals for the year?
Yeah, you got to do some goal setting. Like, I got to sculpt this body. I got to work this body. Like, I've got that. And obviously, I got to get myself ready for softball season. There's a lot I have to do physically, and then the mental part too. I'm constantly going over situations on the diamond, second and third, 2 outs, that kind of stuff. So that's stuff that I'm thinking about in January to get me ready for the rest of the year.
When does softball season start? Because I came out around the playoffs and I saw Jake playing, I saw you playing. So when is the exact season in the city?
It's May. It starts. I don't like it. I don't want to get into it. We'll take the whole podcast. But for whatever reason, the Media League in Chicago starts in early, middle May, and then we take off for Memorial Day, and then we're back. I'm like, just start after Memorial Day. But and everyone is so out of shape in the first 2 weeks. That's where you're going to get your hammy pulls, and everyone's just out of breath. That all happens on May 17th.
Nah, that makes sense. Jake, I know you be getting down with the softball too, but you got any New Year's resolutions, short-term, long-term goals for the year?
My grandma had a funny one last year, which was no volunteering and no reading books. But I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try to. I feel like social media for me isn't very social. I feel like I'm kind of just on there lurking, at least on Instagram. So my goal this year is to post something every time I go on Instagram. At least a story. Might just be for the close friends, but to make it more social.
Understood. I actually feel the opposite of your granny, because I am trying to do a little volunteering. I am trying to read a couple more books this year. If you are new to CityCast Chicago, every single Friday we bring in great folks like these two gentlemen I have today to talk about some of the biggest stories happening around the city, stories we think deserve a little more of our attention. And then we finish off every episode the same way, and that's with some good news. I'll sing it a little bit later, but not right now. I was off for the first couple of days this week, but one story I did not miss was Mike Madigan taking the stand in his own trial. Starting on Tuesday, former Illinois House Speaker Mike Madigan sat down for his own corruption trial. Madigan is accused, I will remind you, of bribery, racketeering, and various other charges. Justin, you did the Mike Madigan Expose podcast. Why is his testimony so unusual in a case like this?
If you love politics, Chicago politics, this is the story. Mike Madigan, ran the Velvet Hammer is his nickname, ran, Springfield for 50 years. And he's got a corruption trial, and up to this point, it's been a really kind of dry trial where you've had the most interesting stuff's been the wiretaps have gone back and forth, but really there's been a tussle between the prosecution and defense on what is corruption. And you weren't sure. You're kind of like, well, maybe they can't define it, whatever it might be. But the strange and surprising twist that just on a blink of an eye, the defendant, Michael Madigan, took the stand in his own defense, which is a risky move. You see that with politicians. They do not do that. Even remember Rod Blagojevich, who did end up taking the stand in his second trial. But in his first trial, he kept teasing it. I got nothing. I'm going to tell everybody my story. And then they finally said, this is a bad idea. He gets up there. There's just too much exposure because the cross-examination from the prosecution, you could come off and went many different ways to the jury. And so this is a very risky move for Mike Madigan to take the stand. And his defense started with telling his life story. He went, it was kind of interesting. A lot of politicians, they like to, write their own book. Not often are they under oath telling their life story, which is what Mike Madigan is doing in this case. A lot of interesting nuggets, a very interesting nugget about, he really, really famously did not have a cell phone. And so the defense asked him, why don't you have a cell phone? And he's like, because I like to eat dinner with my family. Essentially saying, I want to end my day. I want to keep work at work, which is it's a cute little anecdote. It's nice to pull out, and it's a good story. But does it play to 12 people in a jury that are trying to find out if this dude's lying or not? And then the second thing, which is really crazy, came out Thursday, is that, he said he was really angry that some of these people were doing no work for some of these hires. That's really what he's on trial for, is like essentially extending patronage to the private sector, to ComEd, to AT&T. If you want a good deal in Springfield, you got to hire some of my guys, right? And that he's been doing that, or allegedly doing that for his entire political career. They outlawed it in public office, and so now they're questioning whether you can do it in private. And what's interesting is that he said, I can't believe, I was so angry when I heard that. But they have him on tape showing that he wasn't angry about it, that he knew about it, and that he was sort of wink about it, and that was inadmissible evidence. The judge said, we're not going to play that. Now, the judge, because he went on the stand and he said he was angry, the judge is making that that is now admissible evidence, and the cross-examination will play that evidence. So the jury will see a contradiction. This is the risk you have when you put a guy like this on trial, on the stand. He's showing contradiction. He's showing abnormality. I don't have a cell phone, that kind of stuff. He's showing to 12 jurors that something doesn't add up. And that's the danger. You want to humanize him. I understand that. But it also is a danger that you catch him in contradictions.
Do you think we learned, besides these interesting facts, do you think we learned anything new by having Madigan sit in front of the jurors and sit in front of the judge in this way?
The goal of him being there is to obviously deny the charges, but to show the jury, and specifically those 12 people, nobody else, that he's just a Chicago guy. He's an old guy who does things the right way, and he takes care of his family, and he loves his neighborhood, and he loves Chicago, and has done everything the right way. So if they can convince through his stories, through his nature, through his charm, that's the I'm telling you, Jacoby, you guys know this. The irony of this whole thing is that when Mike Madigan was the Speaker of the House, he rarely talked to the media. He rarely talked to the people, to the voters. He was like famously quiet. And the idea that now he's like, I'm just a humble guy and I'm going to charm the jury, there's a little bit of like, what? Mm-hmm. So it's fascinating that he's up on stage and up on the stand with the opportunity here for the cross-examination to show contradictions.
Do we have a sense of when cross-examination is likely to start? I mean, This trial started in October. I know we didn't expect it to end at the end of the year, but I think this new wrinkle has put, added some time into this. So what's the next steps?
Yep. Cross starts Monday.
Okay.
And because it gets a little in the weeds because you got two lawyers and two defendants. Michael McLean, who's his confidant, is also on trial, so they have to do both lawyers and both defense and cross on both. But it probably will start Monday. It could last all week. The judge told the jury on Wednesday, I think it was, be ready. This could go on longer. This could be a several weeks thing. They're kind of like, I saw some stories in the Trib and the Sun-Times that they're looking at the end of the month, the end of January for this to wrap up. So this is a long trial. And with the idea that Mike Madigan's on the stand now, the cross-examination's got a weekend to prepare. They're going to take their time in trying to catch him in a web of contradiction.
Jake, I want to hear your thoughts on this. Are you surprised that Mike Madigan, of all people, chose to put himself in the fire like this?
I know the ComEd executive and the lobbyist in this case made the same decision. It didn't work out for them. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know what the right move is. But the nicknames for this guy, right? The Velvet Hammer, the Sphinx. He's a guy who doesn't talk a lot, just like Justin was saying. So it's surprising that he's trying to kind of save himself.
The other thing, too, is that Alderman Burke didn't go on the stand. And you would think like a guy like Burke, who we all know from covering, and Jake, you've covered him, he loves the spotlight. He loves 20 minutes at the beginning of a city council meeting to tell everybody what he's thinking about this week. So it's not like Mike Madigan's like, I need to get up on that stand. That's my personality. He's the exact opposite. He does not want to talk. So they're in some sort of situation where they're putting him up on stand because that is against what Mike Madigan has been like. He doesn't like to communicate that way. So it's interesting that he's on the stand.
from the former Speaker of the House to the current governor and mayor, things are a bit frosty between Mayor Brandon Johnson and Governor J.B. Pritzker, and this may be most apparent in a fight over, of all things, regulating hemp products. We've already heard a little bit of them going back and forth when we were talking about the housing crisis for new arrivals, when we talk about funding shortages for CPS. But now we're talking about them Delta 8, Delta 10 THC products you see in smoke shops, the gas station, the corner store. Jake, can you first break down what were officials trying to do about these products exactly? Now, how has that set the stage for yet another standoff between the governor and mayor, essentially?
You know, I think to start this out, you got to go back to Chicago's super messy budget season. So one of the potential solutions that was aired to close Chicago's huge budget gap was a really high tax on hemp, on those Delta 8, Delta 10 products. It didn't pass, but the city definitely wanted to continue to look at that tax as a potential option to close future budget gaps, which it's going to have. And the city was caught off guard last week when state legislators and J.B. Pritzker appeared poised to pass a bill that would strictly regulate those products, that would probably get in the way of their plans at the city level to install that tax. Why were state legislators trying to do that? Because safety. I am young enough to have below the age of 21 as a legal marijuana alternative, and I know it those products are a little strange sometimes. They're kind of hard to dose right. It can be tricky, and they are sometimes apparently marketed towards kids. That's the argument that J.B. Pritzker is making. So when that was about to pass, the mayor got involved, and some aldermen accused Pritzker of being unfair to the city, of leaving Chicago's voice out and kind of taking away a potential revenue option for the city. You know, the mayor also said it's important to regulate this product and it's important to have safety. The bill in question actually was effectively blocked with Chicago's push. It didn't come up for a vote, and that really upset the governor. And so the governor told press the next day that the effort to sort of squash this bill was a safety issue, allows for these products to continue getting into the wrong hands. And he even took a pretty strong jab at the mayor. He said the mayor doesn't really talk with legislators in Springfield, doesn't really call him very often, doesn't have good relationships down there. The mayor tried to play nice and said his team and the governor's team work well together. I'll say this, the Pritzker's team has told me twice in recent weeks that the mayor's team doesn't really meet with them much, has canceled meetings on budget, hasn't really had those conversations. And why this matters is because the city and state need each other. Illinois gets a lot of money from Chicago. Chicago's in Illinois. And in particular, the mayor has pointed to Springfield as the city's way out of its current budget crisis. He said, we need progressive revenue. We need, kind of to tax the rich, basically, to come up with the money needed to run the city. It's going to be really, really hard to get that done when you have bad relationships in Springfield. So this relationship between the governor and the mayor, it's really important, and it's in a bad spot right now.
Justin, I mean, in the last few mayoral terms, there have been, disagreements, standoffs between the mayor and Governor Lori Lightfoot and Governor Pritzker before them, of course. Is this relationship front page news? Is this out of the norm for the relationship between the Illinois governor and the Chicago mayor?
No. But, Illinois has only in recent memory since 2017, 2018, has Illinois been a Democratic blue state. I mean, you had Bruce Rauner, who was a governor, and him and Rahm Emanuel famously kind of headbutted. You had even Blagojevich and the mayor of Chicago kind of got at it, and they were same party guy. And even Jim Edgar and Mayor Daley. So this goes back a ways that there has been a power struggle between the state and the city. When you have, though, party rule, both in your General Assembly, and Governor Pritzker's from Chicago. You have you have a Chicago mayor. They should all be aligned. There's just this idea of like The communication should be the easiest part. Moving the ball over the goal line to get, I don't know, funding for a Bears stadium or funding for a school system or legislation that you need or tax money that you need for a budget approved, that should be the hard part. The actual communication about that should be the easy part. And the fact that they continue to fight over just the community, whether or not they talk, it kills me. They're not even talking about like any sort of ideological difference. They're just talking about he said, she said over, do they communicate? That's not a good sign. And I'm not talking about Pritzker and Johnson should tuck each other in at night talking on the phone. I'm saying these two staffs should be in constant conversation. City of Chicago drives the economic engine, drives the economic conditions for the state of Illinois. They should be in concert. And why they're not, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. I mean, one place that felt like should be an easy win is like providing more resources for grocery stores in the city of Chicago. I mean, back as far as September 2023, Mayor Johnson floated the idea of maybe a public grocery store alternative in the city. Governor Pritzker signed in 2023 $20 million in efforts to fund more grocery stores in neighborhoods and communities that have been largely disinvested from, that have seen Aldi's and Walmart and Walgreens just leave. And Jake, I feel like I've read a couple of stories over the last few days, like the mayor's office and the state were not on the same page about getting funding for this grocery alternative.
Yeah, so you're right, Jacoby. A month after Governor Pritzker came up with that $20 million pot of money to support grocery stores and open new ones, the mayor came out and said he was exploring the possibility of applying for some of that money to start a city-run grocery store in Chicago, or grocery stores as a solution to some of the food deserts here. My Tribune colleague, Talia Soglin, she was told by a city spokesperson Chicago planned to apply for that money to open a city-run store. The deadline passed last week. The city didn't do it. The city didn't apply. The city spokespeople didn't answer her as to why. They did tell Block Club's Quinn Myers, the mayor told him on Tuesday, the city was backing away from the idea, and the mayor suggested it's because it's exploring working with businesses instead. You know, the city does have spend money on trying to open grocery stores in food deserts. They have that deal with Yellow Banana. I think 4 of the 6 stores that they plan to open by April have been opened. So they're making some progress in some ways, but you know, this is something that was flashy that the mayor planned at least at one point to do. And it didn't happen.
I feel like, I mean, we are, less than a week and a half away from an inauguration of this Trump second term. And we know where Chicago, Illinois sits on their radar.
Oh, he loves it. Trump loves Chicago.
Yeah. Bullseye in terms of constantly shitting on the city. We know that federal funding is likely to be stripped from initiatives like education, healthcare, infrastructure. How important is it for these two staffs, these two individuals to get on the same page now, not only rhetorically, because we know they're both individually going to do their, I have Chicago's back, I got Illinois' back. We are going to protect our residents. We know they're both going to do that spiel individually. But if they're not on the same page, that leaves us even more vulnerable.
It's just totally critical, and it doesn't seem like they're there right now. And maybe some of that's just hiding the ball, but I don't think there's been any clear plan on what to do if ICE raids start. There already is a budget crisis, even if federal funding isn't stripped further. Mm-hmm. So to the CTA's credit, the CTA pinned down the red line funding that it had already won. It got the money, so Trump can't take that away now. But we'll find out what else isn't pinned down, because there's going to be wind.
Well, the problem is that the president-elect has proven in his past term that he loves retribution, mm-hmm. and he will use any leverage that he can to win ideological battles, to essentially anything to have states fall in line with his vision. And if Chicago and Illinois do not have all of these funding sources locked down, it's not that they won't get them. They'll just be held hijacked. They'll be hijacked. They'll be blackmailed. Like the idea of like, I'm not giving you this unless you do this. It feels like both J.B. Pritzker and Brandon Johnson are really good at ideological wins. meaning they can get their bodies of legislative, whether it's city council or down in Springfield, to say that to proclamations that we're going to be a place that is supportive of certain rights or this is our ideology. They're not that great getting together to actually pass stuff that gives money, like allocates that kind of stuff. That they have the majority in all the houses, and they're still having fun. The hemp bill is a great example. They never called it to a vote and they have all the majorities because they can't get on the same page.
And Justin, you talked about retribution. The mayor and the governor both have repeatedly taken shots at Donald Trump, and I think to some extent their voters probably like that. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but it might have consequences with this guy. He takes things personally, and he acts in unpredictable ways. And it's going to be interesting to see. I think J.B. Pritzker probably has an interest in growing his profile and continuing to talk his stuff. And I think the mayor's probably going to keep doing that too. So where does that go?
You nailed it.
We just started the year off, but Justin, you dropped an interesting article, some top Chicago development projects you're watching in 2025. Walk us through your list.
I do this every year, and in 2024, it was really kind of the downtown north side. North side gets all the love in Chicago. We know that, right? This year, you kind of look at this, and it's shaping up that the most interesting and I would say impactful developments are actually on the south side of Chicago. That's where most of the energy is at right now for funding, for projects, development. Some of the mega developments we've talked about in the past, like we talk about Lincoln Yards or some of the stuff on the north side, have kind of stalled out. They've had their shot, they did their thing, and right now there's a lot of argument about whether or not they're going to move forward. But on the south side, you have the crown jewel is going to be the Obama Center, which in Woodlawn, right by Jackson Park, is getting close to being finished, and it was supposed to be finished and open doors by October, but they have moved that back to early 2026. But you will see that if you live in Hyde Park in that area, Woodlawn, you see the big tower.
The facade has rapidly gone up.
Yeah, that is going to. I mean, we've been talking about this since Obama left office. And this is almost a reality. So that's the crown jewel. But then we talked about the Red Line extension to 130th. That's huge. That's been talked about, Jacoby, for decades.
65 years.
Yeah. So that's huge. That's coming online. You've got the Quantum Center that came up in this last session where they've approved it. The planning department has approved this Quantum Hub. This is J.B. Pritzker's baby, to bring quantum technology in a hub to actually put this in practice. That's going to be in the Southworks space in the southeast side. And then you got the Bronzeville Trail, which is essentially the 606 for people know on the north side. The Bronzeville Trail is a project that's trying to be pushed right in Bronzeville on 40th, 41st Street. That would essentially take the old Kenwood tracks there, the Green Line tracks, and make a public park. And that's something that Jacoby, you know this in Chicago. That's not something that usually gets invested in, those kind of projects on the south side. So I know it's years after the 606 now, but it is encouraging to see that a lot of development is happening on the south side of Chicago. Now, whether or not these projects come to fruition, that'll be something to watch.
Right. The southeast side, the Michael Reese site, these are a lot of stalled campuses as well.
We've been here before, right?
Exactly.
Right. And so that is something to watch, especially with the Bronzeville Trail. They have the money, and it's good, but that's something that's not going to be completed until 2030. The quantum stuff, the Obama Center, the Red Line extension, which we talked about, those are projects that will get done. They have bigger ambitions to be something that are either the National Center or Presidential Library, or even, as we talked about, they got the funding. So it is just interesting to see that. And, we didn't even talk about the Bear Stadium, which technically is the south side, but, whether that moves from the museum campus to the Michael Reese site, there's a lot still that can happen with the Chicago Bears. So the south side right now having a little resurgence in 2025.
I think for me, as always, is to make sure that the communities in which a lot of these projects are happening continue to get the protections that residents has been fighting for, just as long as lawmakers and benefactors have been fighting for these to go up. I'm very excited for the Red Line extension. My hope is that the business corridors that are popping up around where former people's houses are, that they actually get the love that they deserve. I fear that despite the number of elections in which residents have said they want a community benefits agreement on the books, my hope is that, these temporary jobs do turn into permanent jobs for the neighborhood. And I hope a project like the Bronzeville Trail that isn't, like you said, as flashy, isn't as big name, doesn't sort of get washed under the momentum over the next couple of years as we're sort of waiting for it to come to fruition.
I cover a little bit of real estate. I got some sources who have said that Bronzeville is the hot spot right now. And that's going to be an interesting spot because, you want to keep that heritage and that culture alive. But we all know that Bronzeville has such a rich and history, but it hasn't had sort of like real estate success in the last.
It's been a very start and stop process,
right? But right now, that's where a lot of people are going. A lot of space there for people to build, developers to build. And when you have a Bronzeville Trail, it's not unlike the 606, where you got to watch out for property taxes, like housing coming in along the trail in Logan Square, Humboldt Park, and property taxes. And there's been a mixed bag on that. Especially after they did the assessment, people who were living before the 606 in Humboldt Park. Now their taxes have gone way up. It's hard not to say it's because they've made these infrastructure improvements to their neighborhood.
We finish every single episode on CityCast Chicago the exact same way, and that's with some good news. Jake, start us off today. What is your good news for us?
I love that. I love that voice.
I appreciate
my good
you,
news.
my boy.
I'm gonna keep it personal. I have a basketball league starting up next week. I'm so pumped. I haven't played organized basketball in like a year, so I'm really excited to go and get some buckets. So
yeah, I don't like that. I have a clause. I have a clause in my softball team contract that's like you cannot play basketball. Because what's going to happen is Jake's going to cobble in to the softball being like, I twisted my ankle and I can't play softball now because that's the one sport where there's just constant injury.
No.
It's just constant injury.
Week one, you're going to be gassed. I'm going to be ready to go. I'm going to be ready to go.
You're
right
young.
over
Your
head.
legs will respond. Yeah, you're still young.
My homie called me yesterday waxing nostalgic about these basketball runs we used to do at one of my friends' house. We used to always have enough for like organized runs. And so I assumed that he was like, let's get back to that. And he was like, no, I'm talking about we should just go for early morning runs. I was like, man, if you don't get off my phone, I thought you were talking about going to play basketball. He said, I can't risk my shoulders no more.
Exactly. You just jog now. A light jog is all you can do, Jacoby. Oh my God.
Justin, what is your good news today?
Well, mine is collective for the city. The Kennedy Expressway construction is phase whatever, 2, 3, whatever it is done. And so next week, they're kind of being cagey a little bit already, where they said it was going to be January 13th. They're like, sometime next week. But they are removing the construction stuff off of the Kennedy Expressway right now, and the express lanes will be open next week, which should take, it's not the actual like bumper-to-bumper traffic on the Kennedy that's the problem. It's all of the Google Maps sending people to different neighborhoods to try and shave off 3 minutes from the construction that is messing up the entire near north side of Chicago. So to me, that's huge because you might actually get a breather on Elston and some of the other little side streets that aren't the Kennedy for the winter. But it's only good news. It's a short-term good news because they start the big phase 3 or 4 in March or April, where they're going to do the last monster part of the Kennedy, which is either the inbound or outbound. But the point being, for the winter, we get a respite. So try those new express lanes out. See what they like. See how they feel.
That is good news in Chicago. It's just like, hey, we got a part of the expressway back. They're about to take away another part, but hey, there's this period where we got a couple of them, and it's not really all of them, but it's more than what we had. But we're going back to less in a little bit. Before we get out of here, I'm going to run y'all down a few events that you can find on our events calendar if you head over to chicago.citycast.fm, including a resource fair in Inglewood tomorrow morning from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. You got a Chicago acting workshop in Pilsen from noon to 4 p.m. And then if you want to do some like relaxing yoga and a butterfly haven, head over to the Nature Museum in Lincoln Park, 8:30 tomorrow morning. You can't miss it. It's from 8:30 to 9:45 a.m. Just get there about 5 minutes early. Okay. I can't get out of here without thanking our guest today from Axios Chicago, Justin Kaufman. Always a pleasure.
Oh, you're the best, man. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, I appreciate you. And from Chicago Tribune, basketball ready, softball ready, Jake Sheridan.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Before we get out of here, I want to give a huge thank you to everybody who makes CityCast Chicago possible. Our executive producer is Simone Alisea. Our producer is Michelle Navarro. Our Hey Chicago senior newsletter editor is Sydney Madden. Roving producers this week was Francisco Kilgore. Music we all love is from Sam Thousand. All the Kimonos and Mark Greenberg from the Mayfair Workshop. If you enjoy the show, please share us with your friends and family. Leave us a review wherever you listen. Make sure you subscribe to Hey Chicago. And we're going to be back bright and early on Monday. Please join us. You know, that's my final ask. Be back here. And if you don't be here on Mondays, but you listen like in the middle of the week or something, maybe if you only listen to one episode, maybe listen to like 3 this week. You know, maybe listen to like 4 of them boys. If you listen to all 5, holla at your boy. But if you only listen to like 1, you know, up that. Crank it up. Crank it up. If this is your first one, do some more. Do some more. Go through the crates. All right. Bye.